Some years ago, I was invited to the Binthorum Presbyterian Church. And my hand was held by a reverend, and he made me sit together with all the reverends and the Temen Basan. And I'm neither a reverend nor a Temen Basan. And he took me right in front of the church, because it was a special function where the moderator of the Welsh Presbyterian Church had come to Shillong and to give a tribute to Thomas Jones. And they wanted me to witness that, perhaps because I had done so much on Thomas Jones, they wanted to give reparation to me for the work that I did. Because there was an incident in my research on Thomas Jones where the church was not good enough to me, because after my discovery of Thomas Jones's grave in Kolkata, the grave was put up, marble on it, an epitaph put on it, and they forgot to invite me. Right? And I had to accost a good reverend to say, I was pained when I was not called, because the official organ of the church had brought out an article on the grave and whatever. I was extremely happy, because this was a follow-up of the work that I had done several years ago. The service was significant. Significant because it was an expression giving back to Thomas Jones his rightful place among missionaries, and the great role that TJ, I fondly call him TJ, played in the establishment of the mission and later in the church in these hills. I say this because even while Thomas Jones was alive, he was not given the credit that he should have been given. Yes, he left the church. The church did not want him to continue as a missionary. So what? But he was their first missionary. And from 1847, when he left the mission, till the sesquicentennial celebration of the church. Now that's a long name. Sesquicentennial celebration. 150-year celebration of the church could not have happened without a reference to Thomas Jones. And then the church woke up and functions were there, and Thomas Jones got his rightful place. Not so much by the church, may I say, but by two writers. One a Welshman and another an Australian. The government of Meghalaya has done extremely well, I think, to observe the Thomas Jones Day, which will be tomorrow, and tomorrow we commemorate the second Thomas Jones Day. Am I correct? I'll be correct by saying that? Okay. In observing the day, I pay tribute to two others, Thomas Jones enthusiasts. There are many enthusiasts. I'm included among them because of the work that I've done on Thomas Jones. The first is Nigel Jenkins, who first gave us an insight into the life of the man. A former newspaper journalist, Jenkins was an accomplished writer of prose. Do a search on Nigel Jenkins and you will get a lot of information coming on him. In 1986, he won the Wales Book of the Year prize for his travels, Gwalia in Khassia. Gwalia in Khassia, G-W-A-L-I-A, Gwalia in Khassia. The Welsh in the Khasi Hills. The Welsh don't call themselves Welsh, they call themselves Gwalia. Gwalia in Khassia. The story of the Welsh Calvinistic Methodist mission to the Khasi Hills. Jenkins also has edited an accompanying anthology of poetry and prose from the Khasi Hills entitled Khassia in Gwalia. They were complementary. His travelogue, a copy of which I have here, his travelogue and the collection of poems are complementary. Unfortunately, Jenkins died an early death. I was able to see him in Wales before he died, and when I got word that he was no longer, I quickly phoned up Shillong Times to do an obituary, and I provided the material for his obituary in the Shillong Times. May his soul rest in peace. Much more and very interesting mission history has being presented by Thomas Jones's grandson, great-great-grandson. His name is Professor Andrew May, a professor at Melbourne University, Australia. And it's very interesting how Andrew May got in touch with Nigel Jenkins and David Syiemlieh to then come to our hills and to do a book, copy of which I have over here. Every year on the 24th of January, annually on the 24th of January, in his house in Wales, a bunch of daffodils are placed on a vase, and it's a tradition that I maintain. Hopefully my daffodils will bloom next year again so that I can put it as a commemoration of Thomas Jones. So this is Nigel Jenkins' book. Thomas Jones's great-great-grandson has written a huge history, marvelous history. Welsh missionaries and British imperialism. This is by Andrew May. The cost of it is prohibitive, huge, but you can get a paperback print of it, and I'm sure you'll be delighted to have it. His elaborate, well-documented and erudite history of the Welsh connection in the Khasi and Jaintia Hills is published by Manchester University Press, 2012, and has been well received by academia and among readers and mission historians in these parts. If I may put that down again. How did I become a Thomas Jones enthusiast? I had a dear friend who knew I was going to Calcutta in January of 1996, and he requested me. He was a Tememba son of the Syiemlieh church, and he said, "We know so little of Thomas Jones. When you go to Calcutta, try and find out more on the man." There is only one reference to him, and that is in the official history of the Welsh Presbyterian Calvinistic Methodist Church, the history, what a long title. There is only one reference that he died in Calcutta in September of 1849. Please search. And I did. I went to St. John's Church, and I was told, this is an Anglican church, you will find nothing on a Presbyterian. And the Presbyterians aren't in Calcutta. So I went to St. Andrew's Church, and Reverend Noel Sen, yes, it was Reverend Noel Sen, said, perhaps you would get some information there on Thomas Jones. And I knew the date of his death, and I said, may I have the burial register? And the burial register came, wrapped in velvet, beautifully maintained. My golly. Here was a document I loved for the treasure of information in it. And I turned the pages, and I got an inscription there in beautiful calligraphy on the date of death of Thomas Jones, his burial, and the grave number. Quickly I took a taxi from BBD Barb to Karaya Road to the Scottish Cemetery, and asked the man in charge, show me the grave of Thomas Jones, and he said, I cannot, because it's overridden by jungle and bush and bamboo, and there are no, the marble has all been broken up. It took me 2 hours to clear the site. There was 150 years of earth, right, which had settled on the grave, and we dug, and we got the grave exposed. No marble cover, except a small rectangular slot where perhaps a cross could have been placed, but broken. Nobody knew the grave. I came back, wrote about this, even told the church about it, and they forgot it. They forgot it. But don't worry, this is life. Later on, they would awake when the sesquicentennial celebration would come, and they would have to go back to Thomas Jones, the good man that he was. After discovering the grave at Karaya Road Cemetery, and believe me, my happiness today would be fulfilled if when any of you go to Calcutta, find your way to Lower Circular Road, Karaya Road, take a bunch of flowers, write something on it, and place it on Thomas Jones's grave. You assure me that, right? Your students will assure me that, right? You will. Find your way to Thomas Jones's grave and make reparation for what he gave us by putting some flowers on his grave. Subsequent to the research on Thomas Jones's grave and the discovery, and telling my friends here in the hills what I had done, I went back to London some years later to do another research on a book which was published subsequently, which was on a different theme than the one that I did on church history. And in between getting the material for the book which was to be published, I asked for the Bengal marriage register, the Bengal marriage register. And getting the Bengal marriage register of 1845, I was able then to get the marriage certificate of Thomas Jones and his second marriage. But I'll tell you something about his first marriage in time, because Anne deserves to be known more perhaps than Emma Patel. He will be remembered in prayers and sermons. He'll be remembered in institutions such as this. And I tell you, he'll be remembered too whenever we sing Vikasi, Vikasi, because Vikasi, Vikasi was translated from Welsh into Khasi by a missionary. And Vikasi, Vikasi is not only the national anthem of Vikasis, but it is the national anthem of the Bretons and the Welsh. There are three groups of people who sing the same tune for their national anthem: the Khasis, the Bretons, and the Welsh. Do a search. And the name of the Breton song is Old Land of My Fathers. Old Land of My Fathers. I can't go into the Welsh and the Gaelic pronunciation of it because I'll do a howler there. But in translation it would read, O land of my fathers. The Presbyterian Church has done well to place a marble cover to the grave and plaque remembering the founding father of the Khasi alphabets and literature and the pioneer of the Welsh Presbyterian mission in the Khasi Hills. The members of the Presbyterian Church in Calcutta annually, on his death anniversary, which is September of every year, lay flowers and wreaths on his grave. A college is named after him, the principal of which is a nephew of mine. Several schools are named after the man, and the Presbyterian Church has named a school of mission after Thomas Jones. Primary school teachers remember the RBKD that he gave to us in 1842 and have their own celebration in these hills. As we commemorate the man who started the mission in these hills, and as the commemoration unfolds, we would have done well to remember this Welshman, missionary, and a fine human being. But you need something on the life of Thomas Jones. Who was he? Born on 24th January 1810 in Tennyfrid, Montgomeryshire, Wales, Jones was among 10 children of Edward and Mary Jones. After living for some years in Liverpool, the family returned to Bereau and settled in the Linford mill, where the young Jones learned to trade as a joiner and as a carpenter and as a miller. The mill that he lived in is close to a stream, and it has a wheel to grind wheat. And that's what he did for a living. The father was a miller and he was a joiner, a carpenter. You remember Ma Tukin Rimbai? Right, Ma Tukin Rimbai? He had a souvenir somewhere, and he mentioned over there about Thomas Jones marrying a Kong Kutel Ding Dong. Kong Kutel Deng Do. And it struck me that I had not known Thomas Jones, and neither the church had made an admission that he had married a Khasi. But let me go into the details of this. Thomas Jones did not marry a Khasi. He married Emma Cattell. And that was the discovery of the marriage certificate that I had found in London. And I brought a copy of that back, because it was important for Andrew May to know his ancestry, right? And sometimes we Khasis, we take pride in all sorts of connections which are not there, and therefore I had to test my material. And my testing of the material showed me that he did not marry a Khasi. Have any of you walked the David Scott Trail from Mount Lung down to the river? Have any of you walked that trail? How many of you? Put your hands up. You can see, right? Okay. Have you come across a grave there of Camilla? Did you come across a grave, Camilla? Camilla, soft silken primrose, fading timelessly. Soft silken primrose, fading timelessly. There's a grave on that road, which David Scott built, where a young girl, she must have been an infant, buried, no indication of her name other than Camilla, no indication of her parents, no indication of the year of her death, date of her death other than the year 1843. And a good Khasi historian, R.S. Lingdal, in some publication of his, says that Camilla was the daughter of Thomas Jones. I tested my material, and I found there was no way of Camilla being the daughter of Thomas Jones. Because I have the genealogy with me. I have tested it in archives in Calcutta, in London, and I also have tested it with information which I got from Andrew May. Camilla must have been the daughter of some other European, could have been a Khasi mother too there, and we don't know. So whenever you walk the David Scott Trail, take another bundle of flowers with you and search for Camilla's grave, because I think she deserves flowers on her graves. And I hope that there'll be nothing done to destroy that beautiful grave that you have on the David Scott Trail. Jones married Emma Cattell. Setting out for Cherrapunji, as it was called, with his wife Anne, soon after his affirmation to become a missionary, he arrived Cherrapunji on 22nd June 1841. Earlier to Thomas Jones, the Khasis had heard of Christianity through Keshab Chandrapal, the first convert to Christianity in Bengal. He had come into Sylhet and had resided in Pandua for some time, and he would visit the markets and preach the gospel. After him came Jacob Tomlin. Jacob Tomlin came to these hills in 1827, and he stayed on for a few months till 1828. Then came Alexander Lish, a young 18-year-old Anglo-Indian who came up to the hills sent by the Serampore mission. So Thomas Jones was not the first of the missionaries to come. He was not the first. Never say he was the first. He was the third or the fourth. But his impact was lasting. His impact was lasting. Despite the difficulties of climate, because Cherrapunji, it rains, it just simply pours. And he came in the monsoon, not the best of the time to arrive Cherrapunji. Despite problems of language and funds, Jones set up the mission at Syiemlieh, Sora. By early the following year, he opened the first 3 schools. Again, it's not, I'll correct myself, not the first 3 schools, because Alexander Lish had set up 3 schools, Sora, Maumulo, and Mausmai. He started the schools again where Alexander Lish had started these schools. That same year, he worked and returned from Calcutta. He took some Khasi boys along with him to Calcutta, and there's an account of these Khasi boys going down with him to Calcutta. But he returned back in 1842 with the first Khasi primer. the RBKD. And there was no U, it was a double O. So if it was U Tirot Singh, it would not be U Tirot Singh, but double O Tirot Singh. Later on it was changed. The refinement would come sometime later. But Thomas Jones played with Bangla for some time, because the Sarampo mission had first translated the Bible into Khasi using the Bengali script. 500 copies of this book, the Bible verse, printed. Who has a copy of it? We do not know. But I tell you, I've placed my hand on it. I have placed my hand on it. Right? It's available in the British Library. After Alexander Lish, after the Sarampo mission used Bengali, so did Alexander Lish. And so did Thomas Jones. But Thomas Jones's first efforts at Bangla made it so difficult for his students to study, he decided on the Roman script. The Roman script was neutral, no cultural influence. The Bangla script, pardon me saying it because I've been criticized for it, using the Bangla script would have had some cultural influence. Tirot Singh could speak in Khasi. The Khasi chiefs in Sora spoke in Khasi, spoke in Bangla. They were familiar with it because of their cultural connection with Sylhet and Bangladesh. But Thomas Jones came without Bangla, and for him it was easier to use the Roman script. And I'll tell you at the end of it how it was done. Right? There's a technique in giving information. You don't want to give it in the beginning. Right? You want to give it at the end. So I'll let you know how that was done. But this beginning of the Khasi script was the first literature for the Khasi schools and the nascent Khasi literature. The success of this decision to use the Roman script was in time to become the vehicle by which other mission societies reduced the writing, the languages of numerous other tribes in the Northeast. In this sense, therefore, Thomas Jones's impact goes far beyond the Khasi Hills, far beyond the Khasi Hills. From Sora, the Presbyterian mission took its mission to Kachar, to Sylhet. From Sylhet, it went to Mizoram, into Manipur. But the Roman script, which was tested first in the Khasi Hills, was then applied to the Garos in 1862, applied to all the Naga tribes by the American missionaries who came in. Today, this use of the Roman script is under some cloud because of cultural influences using the Devanagari script. And you would find the Bodos in a quandary whether to use Roman or Devanagari. Or the tribal communities in Tripura who are using either Bangla or the Roman script. But it is settled that at least in the Khasi Jayanti Hills, Garo Hills, Mikir Hills, the Naga Hills, Lushai Hills, the Roman script has come to stay, right? It has come to stay. With applications by the Khasis for recognition of their language in the 8th schedule, I'm sure it will be done. And again, we have to go back to Thomas Jones to acknowledge the work that he did for that script. He translated the Welsh Catechism. He published Ka Kitab Nong Yalam, the first journal of the church, the Kitab Nong Yalam. And he worked on the translation of the Gospel according to St. Matthew. That's nice. Thank you. He translated the Gospel according to St. Matthew, and he published it in 1846. He visited Jowai in 1845, and that was the start of the mission in the Jayanti Hills. Thomas Jones worked in Sora alone for 18 months. 18 months, there was no other missionary other than himself before other missionaries joined. Jones had the distinction, I always say, much to the annoyance of my good church friends, of having not converted a single Khasi to Christianity. He did not convert a single Khasi to Christianity. And he has that unique distinction of being a missionary who did not fulfill his missionary endeavor. But he started a church. Church was to grow subsequently. You can imagine the difficulties of Thomas Jones preaching in the Yo Sora on a faith that the Khasis knew so little about, a salvation and a land far away and Palestine. They did not know the geography. They couldn't imagine the faith and the hope that Thomas Jones had come out for. This is not the reason that he fell out with the church. Differences soon erupted between Thomas Jones and William Lewis, who came soon after him, on the purpose of mission. Because Thomas Jones's mission was less of Christian mission, but more on livelihood. He taught the Khasis how to saw the wood. He taught them to distill liquor, not for consumption, but to be a medicine, right? He taught them in their schools, and he got their grammar out, and he got them their primer. And he was a good friend of the Khasis. He was a good human being. He was a good example as a missionary. And for a man as lonely as he was, when his wife died in 1845, Thomas Jones married a second time, Emma Cattell. Emma Cattell was only 15 years old. They married young those days, right? Very young. Our grandparents married even young. Right? No problem. Right? But she was of the Anglican faith. And that again must have made his good Presbyterian friends annoyed. Number one, that there was what they called an injudicious marriage. The official history talks about it as being an injudicious marriage. And I have a paper on this injudicious marriage. And Thomas Jones must have felt forlorn, marrying a second time, the church not happy with his marriage or with his mission and the work that he was doing. He became a trader, became a tea planter in Pomrang, just between the Khasi and the Giant Hills. There's Pomrang village. Remnants of some of the trees that Thomas Jones planted are still to be found there. But that mission collapsed. His business endeavors collapsed. He came in conflict with Henry Inglis. Henry Inglis was an Anglo-Indian. Father was European, mother was Indian. Lived in Sylhet, grew up in Sylhet. Henry Inglis was the man Tirot Singh surrendered to. I should be annoyed about, I'm from the clan of Syiemlieh, from Tirot Singh. But history is different, We can't be biased and partial. Henry Inglis was who Tirot Singh surrendered to in 1833, January of 1833. This was the same Henry Inglis that Rajendra Singh abdicated as the aim of the Jayanti Hills in 1835. And it was this same Henry Inglis who hounded Thomas Jones out of our hills. He pushed him out and he fled to Calcutta. He was struck by malaria and he died in Calcutta on, what is that date? 16 September 1849. 16 September 1849. I have a record of who buried him. There must have been just that one pastor who buried him. The details of this could be found in other publications. Now, history can be a very boring subject, isn't it? Is it boring? Not boring. No. If you make it history interesting and you weave the different facts, here's my historian friend here who's, were you in history with us? You were in history with us, all my students. Yeah, I get students visiting me and thanking me for the role that I played in their lives over the years. One day in the UPSC, I have the secretary of the NEC coming over to share a cup of tea with me, and this is Mr. Ram Muiva. I taught him in 1980. And just today I've been to a death. My mama died in Malki, and I visited the daughter of my mama, who I taught in St. Edmunds way back in the 1970s again. So teaching is a great profession, and history could be boring. You know, the Chinese don't like Indian history because there are two things in Indian history: names and dates. It reminds them of a telephone directory. But history, if you weave the events together and you piece them together, it could be interesting. And I'll go into another aspect of the life of Thomas Jones. In September 2000, several years ago, I traveled up to my old school, Dr. Graham's Homes in Kalimpong. A great school, founded by a Scots, not a Welsh, but a Scots missionary in 1900. 24th September 1900. And as a historian, I smelled something. I said, I must go to the school archives and look through the first register of names of students in the Dr. Graham's Homes. Because the first lady, the lady who looked after the first group of students was Jean Emma Cattell. Jean Cattell Jones. Now, I must get it correct. Jean Cattell Jones. That name struck on my mind, and I looked at the register. Number 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the students who were admitted to the homes in 1900 were the great-great-grandchildren of Thomas Jones. Thomas Jones married Emma Cattell, I mentioned that, 1846. While Thomas Jones was escaping to Calcutta from the hands of Henry Inglis, Emma Cattell delivered a son who came to be known as Thomas Cattell Jones. Cattell was the mother, father was Jones, Thomas Cattell Jones. Thomas Cattell Jones was born posthumously. Posthumously means? Yes, posthumously means after the death of the father, right? And he was brought up by his mother for some years. The mother married a Mr. Mackay, a tea planter, and moved down to Sylhet. And Thomas Cattell Jones went to Weybridge, to a house in Weybridge close to London called Cherahurst. Look at that, Cherahurst. I still have to locate that house in Weybridge, Cherahurst. And he grew up in Cherahurst, went to Edinburgh, trained as a doctor, returned to Sylhet, and worked in Sylhet as a medical officer. He had 6 or 7 children, and I have the names of all 6 or 7 of the children. 2 died in 1897 as a result of the typhoid or the disease after the earthquake of 12th June 1897. Thomas Cattell Jones also died in 1897, and his dear wife was left to look after 4 children. I show 5, 4. I show 4 children, and she had no place to look after them. And that's when Dr. Graham's in Kalimpong invited Jean Cattell Jones to go to Kalimpong with her 4 children and look after the Anglo-Indian children who were the first children to go up to the homes in 1900. These 4 children have grown up. One, her name was Gwelian, is the grandmother of Andrew May, that historian. Thomas Jones's great-great-grandson, right, who writes that history. Gwelian goes to Australia and settles there. Her sister Margaret also goes to Australia. A brother Llewellyn goes to New Zealand, and another brother goes to Kanpur. So they are moved out. And if you read through Andrew May's wonderful history over here, which is a a history, a very well-documented history, but he gives you his own life. He talks about search for Thomas Jones, he talks about the Khasis and the culture, and this very elaborate connection of Europeans who were living in the Khasi and the Jayanti Hills at that time. The several Christian missions left an indelible mark in championing the cause of providing written script for tribal communities and taking up the cause and use of the Assamese script. It was the American missionaries who also gave the Assamese their script. Otherwise, it would have been Bangla, right? It was them, particularly the raw sign. But the first person to use the Roman script was not Thomas Jones. The first person who toyed with it was an American missionary, Oliver Cutter. He came up to Upper Assam in the 1830s among the tribes of present-day Arunachal. And there he found a stupendous task of how to give the tribes a script of their own, and he toyed with using the Roman script. He never could develop it because the tribals came down to the encampment of the missionaries and they had to flee to Naugam. That idea collapsed. I've already said that Alexander Lish had first used portions of the translated portions of the Bible into Bangla, and so also did the Sarampo mission at close to Calcutta. Thomas Jones arrived in these hills without any knowledge of another Indian language, no other Indian language. He too attempted to give the script, the Khasis a script which was Bengali. But then in 1842 he started the Roman script, and I'm still to come why he did that. But the start of giving the Roman script flourished in time, and the missionaries who came after them developed the literature. It was first a missionary effort. William Price published in 1855 an introduction to the Khasi language. It goes back to 1855 and 1842. John Hugh Roberts labored to produce the English Khasi dictionary, 1870. Imagine bringing a Khasi English dictionary out, 1870. Huge task. William Williams started Unonkit Khubor, a Khasi monthly, in 1889. 10 years later was published the Khasi Bible. And if you want to see a copy of the Khasi Bible, and if there's none in our Khasi Hills and the church is over here, the early Bible, one would have to write to the Bible Society of India, which is in Swindon. And the Bible Society in India in Swindon has all the Khasi versions of the Bible. There are about 20 versions of it that came out, and I have a list of these somewhere. It does not provide us the alphabet. So the inscription on Thomas Jones's grave in Calcutta is correct. Not intended as a grammar or a primer, the use of Roman script is interesting, and Lish is to be credited with this first step. And perhaps, we do not know, but Thomas Jones could have read Alexander Lish's The Khasis, got the idea from him, found that no alphabet was provided, and therefore got the 22 alphabets which he first gave in his primer of 1842, the RBKD. I credit Principal Silvanus Lemare for telling us that it was not Thomas Jones who first used the Roman script, but it was Alexander Lish. But here I'm saying that we must give Alexander Lish that credit, but we must give Thomas Jones credit too for giving us the alphabet, right? The alphabet and the first stirrings in Khasi literature, whether it was the catechism and the church literature and whatever. It has taken the church a long time to honor the man, so forlorn and forgotten, so little spoken of. I'm going to keep a record tomorrow of how many celebrations or how many observances are there tomorrow. I'm sure there won't be many. Right? Because then comes Sunday, and perhaps on Sunday they will do it. But on Sunday there's no reporting of the sermons, Did Thomas Jones deserve this position? No. And the church was pretty unfair to him. But life has been good, and history makes amends. History makes amends. The church in our hills only woke up but recently to honor the man. This has come timely and not too late. For Thomas Jones now finds a respectable place in Khasi history. The church in Wales too has changed its view on their first missionary to the Khasis. For what Jones started was to become the largest overseas venture of the Welsh church. The largest overseas venture of the Welsh church was in the Khasi and the Jayanti Hills. Thomas Jones' day and his observance has added more respect to a man for his lasting impact on literature and school education, if not the faith that he brought here. Time heals. Thomas Jones is fondly remembered today for what he was and what he set out to make known the way to salvation to thousands that should never hear of it, should I not go, and much more. Kublai.